Well, good Tuesday morning, or at least as I'm recording this, it's the night of January 10th. So maybe some stories have changed between now and the next few hours by the time you folks out there see this. Glad to have everybody back here for another great day at Valliant Renegade. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, well, I hope this video will do it for you. Please hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Do share this video out, and of course, leave a comment before you head out today. We always love to get the audience's feedback and some thoughts and comments on what we talk about in these videos. But let's go into this because, as I've said before so many times on this channel, stories in the major media publications don't come out by accident. Things always tend to interconnect for a reason, and especially when it comes to a PR mega house like Disney. Well, we got this story in the last day or so. This is the report from Pirates and Princesses, or as many of you may know them better by their YouTube handle, Clownfish TV. But here we go. Miss Marvel, yet another Disney property, is facing some extensive reshoots, according to them. We're going to talk about that today with my good buddy Kamran Pasha back here for another episode this week of Our Typical Conversations. And we're going to talk about this and how it connects to some other things that I think is going on that we've seen, because we've seen some reshoots that have been going on 6 days a week for 6 weeks. Just recently wrapped up some major reshoots for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Probably going to see some reshoots coming up. I'm expecting for Black Panther with what's going on with that for Black Panther 2. Don't be surprised if we don't see that in the next few months. But more specifically, we saw another article seemingly on the surface that may be unrelated, but I don't think it is. And we're going to talk about why tonight. When I did a video Friday night about how Turning Red, the new Pixar film, was being yanked from theaters, and that frankly, theaters and Hollywood media are seeming to get very upset over this. This is kind of a consistent thing now with Disney, following Soul about this time last year, and then Luca about six or 8 months ago. All these movies were shunted directly to Disney Plus, bypassed the theatrical window. Theaters none too happy about it. And I said, I think there's more to the story than just going to Disney Plus. I said I think that probably part of this is that Disney didn't have a lot of confidence in the film to spend another $100 million on marketing to put this movie in the theaters. Well, it's a little funny how today we got a little bit of an update on that. And I compared it to Sing 2, and I said, look, here's the bottom line. On day 19, Encanto was at $71.9 million domestically in the box office. And on day 19, Sing 2, which, by the way, is already available to rent on premium video on demand. If you go on iTunes right now, you can rent Sing 2 for $25. Sing 2 is already at $108.6 million at the domestic box office, a representation of 51% higher return than Encanto was at that same time on a budget of $85 million from Universal Studios compared to Encanto's $150 million budget. I think Disney is just a little leery of going all in on marketing theatrical releases at this point when they don't feel like they have the gravitas. At least the films that they have coming up do not have the gravitas to warrant that and could create greater losses than they otherwise would generate. And sure enough, today, January 10th, boy, this movie comes out just this morning from Variety magazine. Why does Disney keep sending Pixar movies straight to streaming? Well, we got an answer here. And I swear these folks at Variety must be listening to my YouTube channel. From the article in Variety, quote, "But putting a Pixar movies in theaters doesn't come cheap. The studio's movies typically cost $175 to $200 million to produce and then another $100 million to promote. Gee, what did I tell you? Taking that kind of swing, even for a towering studio like Disney, represents a gamble amid the rocky box office recovery. It's significantly more expensive to market a movie in cinemas compared to streaming releases." Well, there you have it. What did I tell you 3 or 4 days ago on this channel right here at Valliant Renegade? I told you exactly this. Glad to see Variety's catching up. But here's the thing, and this is where the other shoe finally dropped, and this is the conversation that I'm having tonight with Kamran Pasha. This today is hitting everywhere, and this hit several hours after that article from Variety. Disney CEO Bob Chapek lays out 2022 priorities in a New Year's memo note to employees. Now, what have I been saying for some time on this channel? What has Bob Chapek been saying? We've had public statements from Mr. Chapek saying that Disney was going to go back to a distribution-focused model, meaning that audiences were going to decide what was going to come from Disney Plus, in so many words, or from Disney in general, both in theaters and on Disney Plus. And we have a lot more detail on that has just come out today. And frankly, there's no better person to discuss all of this with than Mr. Kamran Pasha. So stay tuned. Here we go. Renegade Online. All right, folks, so welcome back. Another week here with my buddy Kamran Pasha. And before I get into it, of course, always, if you're not subscribed yet, please, I hope this will be the video that you do it. I know I usually get around 70% of my audience these days are new folks that are not yet subscribed. It's amazing to see what YouTube is doing. I'm glad everybody is really enjoying this so much. So please hit the like, the subscribe, the share button, leave a comment before you go. And by all means, definitely do go check out Kamran Pasha on his Patreon. He's also on Instagram too, but definitely go check out his Patreon. Link will be in the video description below, as always, because a lot of these conversations, of course, get started on Patreon. So Kamran,
as the one we're going to do today, started with 2 articles from Patreon this weekend. So here we go.
Absolutely. So Kamran, how you doing this week? Looking forward to this one.
Good. It's beginning, and Happy New Year to your audience. And I'm excited. I think we're in a very interesting new era for Hollywood. And we're going to talk about those things because there's a lot of stuff that you and I have been talking about that we believed had to be happening behind the scenes is now beginning to percolate to the surface. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Indeed it is. And in the intro to this video, we covered some of those stories. We brought up the stuff about the Marvel's Disney Plus show that also has a counterpart that's going to be in the theaters, although that's not being discussed too much yet. But what we're looking at is the TV show reportedly undergoing some, quote, significant or substantial reshoots, more than just normal pickup shoots, which is a typical thing with a lot of movies. Most productions, I know, usually book a couple of weeks worth of reshoots. You know, they get to the editing booth and they see, this shot didn't work the way we wanted it, or we need to add another line or a scene here. They always book that in. But extensive reshoots is something completely different. And I found it funny
That's when the story's not working. That's when the story's not working. Or an actor is not working. Something is substantially wrong.
Yes, indeed. Something substantially isn't working. We talked about something similar in a previous video with yet another Disney property with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. You know, that underwent 6 days a week for 6 weeks of reshoots. That's a substantial amount of reshoots.
Yeah, that's not normal. That's close to what they did on Solo, right? I mean, that's like essentially reshooting a large portion of that movie.
Yeah, exactly. And now they're saying that it's to add a bunch of cameos and things like that. And that may be, but it tells me there might be some of that, but there's obviously a lot of other stuff. Yeah.
36-day reshoot. That's, a lot of these movies don't have more, I don't know what the original shoot schedule was on Doctor Strange, but it probably was around maybe 90 days, I would think. 36, that's about a third. That suggests a third of the movie need to be reworked.
That's a substantial amount of shooting. And like I said, adding some cameos, okay, I understand they wanted to save some surprises, but that doesn't take 36 days to do, folks. That's a massive
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
It is.
I've been on shows where we had to reshoot, one day, and the amount of angry conversations between line producer and executives and on budget for that, 36 days is not a joke.
Yeah, I mean that's massive. And then in relation to a video I did Friday night, which I didn't think would be much of a hit because it was a Friday night, already over 4,000 views in a couple of days. It's one of the bigger videos I've ever done. Surprisingly, Disney yanked yet another Pixar movie from theatrical release to be exclusive on Disney Plus. Mm-hmm. And I said in the intro, I don't think that Disney was real pleased with the reception to Encanto, especially after seeing what Sing 2 did. It beat it to a $90 million mark. Sing 2 did it in 12 days. It took Encanto 37. Sing 2 now standing at about almost 110 million. I think Disney was a little tepid. I think they want to get stuff on Disney Plus. But it comes into an article today. Let me pull it up on the screen because, we always talk about the other shoe dropping. Well, I think, Kamran, the other shoe might have dropped today.
Yeah, I think a
Here
couple.
it is.
I think both right shoe dropped and left shoe dropped.
Yeah. So here it is with Bob Chapek. And this was a memo that he sent out. This is reported by Deadline just about 10 hours ago at the time we record this. And this was a memo that was sent out to, Disney personnel, executive, mid-executive level, maybe the whole company. I don't know. But this definitely went out. This was strategically leaked.
Yeah,
I think it's also
widespread enough. They wanted to make sure that it got out widely to the company and got out to the public. That was done on purpose.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And I think it's also on purpose and no accident that this is coming not 10 days after Bob Iger has completely exited Disney. And Cameron, you and I talked about this on a previous video that, once Iger would be out the door, we'd really see the chains come off of Chapek. And here's the opening salvo.
And look at the photo, by the way. The trades are propaganda, right? So they understand what the purpose of this memo was. You don't have a happy-go-lucky, Bob Chapek standing in front of Mickey Mouse, right? You have him being a powerful, authoritarian leader pointing his finger. This is what we're going to do, son. This is not on purpose.
This is a very, absolutely. The picture is definitely no accident. I want to read a couple of things from this article. Yeah. And it's a lengthy one. We're not going to go through it all.
What if they release a picture as part of their leaked headline? Use this photo.
You're probably not wrong. Honestly, I mean, it's a great. I mean, this is the kind of shot you want to convey authority.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an authoritative image that is being put on here. This is a message in and of itself. Mm-hmm. The old expression, a picture says 1,000 words. Let me read a little bit from this, and then Cameron, I want you to talk about all this and give us your thoughts. Sure. So from the article from Deadline, industry vets, while giving Chapek credit for his accomplishments, took note of the rare public battle with an A-list star, maintaining that such contretemps had not generally been Bob Iger's style. They also raised eyebrows at Chapek's dramatic centralization of the company's distribution structure. Now, this is also from the centralization of this is under Mr. Kareem Daniel, who we discussed in the Friday show. He was the one that went out publicly and made the statements of pulling the Pixar movie Turning Red from theatrical distribution. Mm-hmm. Dramatic centralization of the company's distribution structure in a new unit run by his former protege, Kareem Daniel. Mm-hmm. Chapek's contract runs through February 28th, 2023, which I find interesting because I've not heard that date mentioned before.
I've never seen that before. I thought he might be on until 2025. It's interesting that they mentioned that.
Yeah, February 8th, 2023. So that is now officially in the public venue here. Mm-hmm. Disney's board of directors has also seen turnover in recent years. Susan Arnold, by far the most experienced director, was elevated to chairman late last year as Iger approached his departure.
By far the most experienced director on the board of directors of Disney. Everyone on the board of directors of Disney is an accomplished person, right? It's interesting they went out of their way to say that.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
The others were all basically toadies of Mr. Iger. And the most experienced by far is the one that's independent of him.
Yep. Indeed. Yeah. And she's been there for the better part of a decade or more. So I'm going to read a couple of little snippets from Bob Chapek's actual memo to the staff. Okay. And he went into talking about the three pillars that Disney was going to focus around, and which I think is great because to me, it's kind of like when I've talked in the past about other industries and things like that, the three-legged bar stool kind of thing. It's got to stand up on three legs.
Archetypal, it's an archetypal image that's very ancient. Like I said, in Islam, we have 5 pillars that establish the foundation of the religion. The concept of pillars goes back to the Greeks, the Romans. It's about the fundamental foundation that holds up the roof. Otherwise, it all comes crashing down. It's a very specific. So it's not just like these are our principles. These are our pillars. Meaning, if one of them moves, it's all going to come crashing down on us. So we can't move them.
Exactly. Well, the 3 pillars that he gave, and I'm going to read a couple of snippets from each. Mm-hmm. First, storytelling experience. And again, this is from Bob Chapek's actual memo. Mm-hmm. And I'm quoting. Bob Chapek, I am establishing a new standing monthly meeting with our senior creative leaders to discuss the opportunities that we face as a storytelling enterprise. This will encourage collaboration, sharing of best practices, and stimulate cross-studio ideation. Second, innovation.
Well, let's go. Let's stop there for a second. I want to stop on that one first. That's very interesting. Who's that meeting? That means he's going to be in that meeting. That means every month I want to hear from you your story ideas. I've never heard the CEO of a studio getting that involved. That means he's like, your stories have sucked in the 2 years that I've been here.
And Cameron, who are the two people? Who are the two studios you think he's talking about big time right now?
Well, I mean, the ones that are not succeeding on Disney Plus right now, Lucasfilm and Marvel, right?
Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige.
Kevin Feige. They're supposed to be pillars of their strategy, right? And so I've never heard in my 20-year career the CEO of a studio saying, I'm going to have monthly meetings where you're going to pitch me your stories. So that means if I don't like your stories, you're going to go back, and that means I don't trust you enough that I want to wait 3 months to hear it, or 6 months, or see the cut in the Disney auditorium like I normally would. I want to hear what you're developing every 4 weeks. All right, and I'm going to be able to tell you I don't like that. That's amazing. I've never heard anything like that.
Well, Cameron, let me offer one additional thought to this. I was going to mention this later, but since we stopped right here, which I think was a good idea, but let me throw this at you.
Please.
What I read from this will encourage collaboration, sharing, and best practices, and stimulate cross-studio ideation. This seems to suggest to me that he's going to have all of his studio heads in the room together.
That's exactly what it says to me. And
which means the pressure is on. Yeah, the pressure is on to where it's not just you sitting down one-on-one to where you can walk out of a meeting and say, oh, yeah, we had a good conversation. No. If I'm Kennedy or if I'm Kevin Feige, it's me sitting there with my other 5 or 6 peers from the other studio groups at Disney. I don't want to walk away looking like a dumbass.
This is pure. This guy, I've said this for some time. This guy is Machiavelli. This is pure Machiavellian power. He is basically pitting them against each other. He knows that they are colleagues, but they're also competitors for resources, power, and attention within the system. So
what have we been saying for months?
You get to pitch your dumb idea, and then you see your colleague from Pixar snicker in the room in front of the boss. Like, I don't know about that. You're going to be embarrassed and humiliated. So you're going to make sure whatever you bring better be your A game, because the other jackals in the room are waiting to eat your corpse, right? They're all waiting to feast on you. This is brilliant. I mean, it's pure Sun Tzu. I'm putting all my generals together and making sure that they keep each other in check.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. He's not even playing referee at this point, is because the peer pressure is on. And again, when you talk about, I mean, arguably the weakest link in this chain. Now, you can say what you want about Marvel and their content, but at least they actually have content. When you look at Lucasfilm right now, that's got no theatrical content on the books, except for Indiana Jones, which got yanked back another year. And we've talked about this before, and this is why you think, this is why people like Favreau get the call from Alan Bergman and saying, you're in charge of Star Wars theatrical, because we got to get something going. I'd almost be curious to see if, Kennedy might be in the room, but might Favreau be in the room too?
I can't imagine Favreau wouldn't be in the room.
Because
she doesn't. I mean, I don't think she. I mean, whatever her status is.
How humiliating would it be for her if he was, though?
Oh, it is humiliating. That's the problem. That's the problem. You want to stick around here, and you want to pressure me to stick around? This is what you got to swallow, baby.
This is just stunning. Let me go to the second part here, so we can start wrapping this in.
Yes.
The second is innovation. Okay. And this is a short one. I'll just read the whole thing. Since Steamboat Willie, we have been the world's foremost innovative storytellers. That must continue as technology evolves, giving our creative teams new canvases like the metaverse on which to paint. We should be especially innovative as we seek to bring stories to life in new ways, particularly if they enhance what many call our, quote, franchise ecosystem, which is one of the things that sets us apart. Now, I don't know exactly what he means by franchise ecosystem, but I have a theory. Because what it sounds like to me is we need to be creating stories that sells everything under the Disney banner.
That's franchisable.
Yes, totally. That's not just the movie itself. It's the DVD Blu-ray sales. It's Disney Plus. And most importantly, it's park visits and merch.
Yeah, the whole.
What have they had problems selling recently with the Eternals, Shang-Chi, and Star Wars sequel trilogy? They couldn't sell merch.
And that's where this guy comes from. This guy comes from the parks and the merch side of things. That's how he rose up this mountain. So of course that's gonna be that's what he knows. He's like, all right. So we got all you people sitting in this room here. Okay. Oh, you want to do baby Jabba the Hutt? Are we gonna be able to sell that? Can we sell dolls with that? Can we do that? What are we gonna do with it? Can we make a baby Jabba the Hutt ride? Oh, you don't think so? Okay, next idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's like don't bring the idea. I mean, it's one thing. It's like, and I know Chapek doesn't expect every single character in every single film or television show to be able to sell a doll or action figure.
But there's got to be a plan.
Right, there has to be a plan. There has to be something from the property. Hey, we're going to invest $100 million or $200 million making this Disney property. We better be able to sell something from it besides maybe a movie ticket or maybe a D+ subscription.
Yeah.
You know, they want the merch. I mean, he's right on the money. This is what Disney used to do. Everything they produced had massive amounts of sellable merch across the board. I mean, I remember when they made Cars 3, everybody's like, why are you making Cars 3? It made like $50-60 million in the US because Cars merchandise was selling like $1 billion of merch a year or something like that. It was ridiculous. They didn't care about the movie. They cared about selling the merch.
Yeah.
You know? So, all right, last part, the third part.
And to me, the most important pillar. To me, this is the central pillar of the three.
I agree. Third, a relentless focus on audience. Not a focus on audience, not the audience. A relentless
meaning nothing's going to get in the way of that.
Exactly. And I'm going to read this because this part is just solid gold.
And by the way, I've never heard anything like this part that you're going to.
I haven't either. Not in the industry. Haven't. I mean, not from most Fortune 500 CEOs have I heard this, especially a Hollywood company like this. Quote from Chapek: "We are a big company with many constituents and stakeholders, all of whom have a place in our decision making. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, our most important guide, our North Star, is the consumer. Right now, their behavior tells us and our industry that the way they want to experience entertainment is changing." And of course, he's ostensibly referring to things like direct-to-streaming DTC content, and changing fast thanks to technology and the pandemic. We must evolve with our audience, not work against them. And so we will put them at the center of every decision we make, not work against them.
That clause is the center of this entire memo. That's the point of this entire memo, because other stuff is all, yes, there's interesting things. He's doing this committee that I've never seen before, the studio heads. Okay, that's all interesting stuff. But it's all, the other two things, creativity, innovation. That's all pablum. You've heard this kind of stuff before. I've never heard this.
No.
If someone go out of their way say not work against them, that means that there have been people inside his company who have been working against the audience and the consumer.
Why else would you say that?
Aware of it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a culture of it. He's addressing this whole memo is we're going to change the culture of this company, and we're going to remove anyone that's going to work against the consumers. This is the most stunning thing. This is everything that I believed he believed in his heart that's now being said out loud. And I'd said just 4 weeks ago, the moment Susan Arnold is installed, the moment the Padishah Emperor is in charge, who I believe this man is her protege, the moment he's going to be unleashed as Vader to go out, he's just going to start going in and taking out the separatists. This is the attack on the separatists. This is him going in and saying, sorry, you're not part of the plan anymore. We're done.
Yeah. I can't. I mean, I've probably read that line probably a dozen times today.
What is this?
And it still stuns me every time I read it. I mean, that is to say that the consumer is the focus or the relentless focus, but then to put that tag at the end and not work against them, like you said, it obviously means he's recognizing and he's publicly addressing the fact that there have been factions inside Disney working against their audience.
And now you've just hit the other issue, which is the beginning, before the but. There are factions. That whole preliminary thing, there are these stakeholders and all that stuff. Yeah. That's acknowledging that there are all these characters running around. That's acknowledging that there are these identity politics, identitarians, whatever, running around inside the company. And they all have a voice in this. But The voice is never going to be allowed to go against the consumers. You want if at that next meeting, Kathleen Kennedy or whomever says we really need to have this this character of XYZ identity. It's really important to us on this show. He's like, okay, is that what the audience wants? Oh, the audience doesn't want that. Okay,
Yeah.
you've had your voice at the meeting. Next,
right. And the proof's in the pudding, especially with some of these properties that now have a fiscal history. I mean, you again look at the history, the financial history of the Star Wars projects, the cinematic projects, with maybe the exception of Rogue One to this point, that have come. The merchandising sales, apart from maybe BB-8, you know, as far has been pathetic. You cannot find sequel trilogy merch anywhere anymore. It's gone unless it's on a clearance rack in dirt cheap or something like that.
Yeah, it's like trying to find a Betamax. It's sort of
I mean, it's all been replaced by Mandoverse. You know, when you look at Marvel, in fact, world class bullshitters, Jeff over there did another video today where he loves going out and looking at like Target and GameStop, and it's like, look, here's a huge rack, still have discount merchandise for Eternals and Shang-Chi hanging on the shelves. They went on discount racks before the movies even came out and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that's the sort of thing. Although we look at it, it's like, oh, that's cute. It's a YouTube video. It's like, no, that's reality. And Disney, they recognize this because they're marketing partners like Hasbro that make all these toys and have to invest millions, tens of millions of dollars producing all this merchandise. They sell it to places like Target and Walmart. Target and Walmart get stuck with this stuff. And it's like Chapek knows if we keep doing this, the wholesalers and the retailers are not going to keep buying in the same quantities anymore.
Cut down their orders. It's just like, look, this isn't selling. It's not selling. We're going to do next order is going to be 40% of the last one, and that's not
exactly. Yeah, that's not working for anybody. Hasbro doesn't want to do it. Target and Walmart don't want to do it. GameStop doesn't want to do it. Disney doesn't want to do it. They're there to make money, and they make money by offering a consumer what they want, and the consumer offers them back their money. It's like such a basic concept. I don't know why this has been hard for Hollywood to realize, except for the fact that, as we've discussed, they've been living in a bubble way too long. Well, and this is a gut punch. This is a wake-up call.
Yeah, and we talked about this, that we're dealing with third-generation heirs, not the entrepreneurs who built the company in the first generation, not the managers who managed the wealth that was created by the entrepreneurs. We're living with the third-generation heirs of that, who are neither entrepreneurial nor managerial. Yeah. They're just sitting there on the mountain of wealth that was built by predecessors without the skills necessary to manage it. And so that's how they squandered it. That's the cycle. And now that cycle has come to an end, because now the next stage of it's time to bring the entrepreneurs back. And what is an entrepreneur? By definition, an entrepreneur is someone that is serving a market need, someone who's listening to a market and giving it what it wants. That's what an entrepreneur is. That's what he's saying.
Yeah. And it's a good basic ground level that they really need to get back to, because I think he recognizes they've gone too far off the rails over the years. And in a sense, I kind of feel bad for him, because he is now left with basically what Iger has built up and left him to this point, which has been on the surface, it seemed like everything was going great, but not really, and now he's got to come in here at the end game of it, no pun intended, and try to start getting things back on the right track. He's got an incredible task here. I won't say it's impossible. He's got an incredible task here, which is essentially taking a corrupted and decaying system and trying to bring it back to fresher roots. It's not easy, and it's interesting that they brought the date of 2023. I mean, that's all released on purpose. That wouldn't be public knowledge unless Disney wanted it to be public knowledge. So I'm not sure yet what the strategy of releasing that date is. I can't. I think it's going to take longer than 1 year to implement in practice all of these things. Absolutely.
And for us to see these things. So
that part.
Yeah, the odds are he's expecting to be renewed, because he's putting this in place, saying this is a multi-year strategy, and my contract is up, but I'm not going anywhere because my mentor is now the big boss, right? And so I'm going to be around, guys. Don't think that you're going to get rid of me in 2023 and it goes back to business as usual.
No, and I honestly, at this point, right now, as I'm saying this, January 10th, 2022, I think it would be totally unreasonable and ridiculously outrageous to let him go at this point next year, because that is nowhere near enough time for someone in his position to get this boat moving in a direction that he's picked. Because
and this is a rational direction. His investors, the shareholders, the other board members who are actually thinking with their brains and not with their buddy relationships are thinking, okay, this makes sense. This makes absolute sense. So we need to do this, right? So we need to give this guy the time to implement this.
Well, that's just it. I mean, it's like you said, it's the second part. It takes years for us, the consumers, to really see, this whole plan come to fruition. Because if you think about it, and obviously you can attest to this better than I can, if they start making radical changes now and start making new projects and new properties, it takes 2 or 3 years to get those from conception to a big screen or to Disney Plus. It's a very long gestational period. They don't happen overnight. You can try to make some changes to existing projects that are in production, and that would lead us into our next topic. We've had several of these kind of things happen in the last few months with some big reshoots. But in terms of original properties kind of getting back to roots, that's going to take some time. I have no expectation to see that Chapek's going to change. And I think, like he talked about in his last earnings call, where 2022 is a big year for new content production for Disney Plus. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that roll out by the end of this fiscal year 2022, which for Disney is September 30th of each year. So Cameron, let's talk about some of these reshoots. And you were talking about this before in some of your Patreon articles. So tell us what you have heard about this. And I know you've heard some things about, some of how things work inside the writer's room at Marvel. I think obviously all this ties together. I think this all goes together. So go ahead.
Sure. So I've written on my Patreon information that was given recently by a fellow screenwriter who knows a lot of the people, or at least a lot of the writers that work at Marvel right now. And this person was telling me that several of their friends have quit Marvel shows because they didn't like the culture that Marvel had created. I said, what is this culture? What's happening there? And they revealed to me that apparently, and I trust them because this makes sense based on what we're seeing, is that Marvel isn't like other shows that I deal with, that I've worked on, where a writer's room comes up with ideas, then they go back to the studio and the network and pitch them those ideas and get feedback and adjust based on those notes. It's different. In this situation, Marvel has an executive sitting in the room, watching over and essentially controlling the creative process. They're essentially an executive who is not a writer, who is not a showrunner, is acting as the showrunner on these shows. So someone who's one of Kevin Feige's underlings is sent in to sit in Hawkeye or any of these shows, or Loki, and sit there. And the ostensible reason for that is, okay, well, there's plans. If you're just a writer on Loki, or not even a showrunner, or whatever, just a writer on that or Hawkeye, you pitch an idea. Well, it may conflict with something that Kevin has planned a year from now with Black Panther or whatever, right? And so ostensibly that person is there to adjust the conversation away from that without necessarily even revealing to the writer, because there's confidentiality issues. You don't want all the secrets revealed, all that. That's the ostensible reason. The practical effect of that, why people are quitting these shows, is that it's essentially having a political officer from a communist country sitting in monitoring conversations. Because when it's like Eastern Europe, 1955, right? Hungary. You're sitting there, and someone from the Politburo is there to make sure that you do everything according to plan. It's not just about protecting the creative integrity of the long-term story. It's about, I really want to remind you that it's important that we have XYZ representation on the show. I don't really see that in your pitch here. And suddenly you hear that kind of stuff. As a writer, you become afraid. You start restraining yourself. Instead of coming up, what we do in a writer's room is we sit there, we throw out ideas. A lot of them are terrible, but even the terrible ones can open doors to new ways of thinking and new surprises, and we end up in an interesting place, right? But now, because you've got someone who's essentially not a writer, with writers, there's a camaraderie. There's an understanding of how we all think, right? But you've got someone, executives are seen, frankly, in an adversarial way. They're seen as people that come in and tell us what to do. So there's already a culture of that disconnect that exists, and for real reasons, because the executives are serving other needs, than the story necessarily. And so the writer, seeing that you have someone who is one of the big bosses sitting in the room there, you restrain yourself, you start changing your pitches. Once you get the feel of that commissar, what their agenda is, you start catering your pitches to the commissar. And as a result, the creativity seeps out of the room. And so, like I said, resubscribed to Disney Plus a few weeks ago to check out Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, I did not like Hawkeye. I thought it ended well. I thought the last couple episodes were pretty good, actually. But I don't think a lot of people would have stuck around to get to those last few episodes. I was shocked in the first couple. Like, what is this? This is not at Jeremy Renner's talent level. This is not at Haley Steinfeld's channel. She's a wonderful actress. This is stuff. These great actors. It's like child. It's like kiddie Super Friends stuff that these great actors are being asked to say and do. It's not at their level. And I was startled by that. And and I'm being told by others who watch other shows that this is better than the others. This is, in their opinion, this is the best written show of all of those. I'm like, this wasn't that good though. And so it's because if that's the creative process, and if good writers are quitting these rooms because they feel threatened and they feel someone standing on top of them, and they don't want that kind of control over their storytelling instincts, that's not good for anybody. And the result is you have these mediocre shows. I think the general feeling, and the ratings seem to support this, is that these MCU shows that came out in the past year are kind of mediocre. They're not at the level of the quality of the films that have come out. And
nowhere close.
Drop. So that's because of because again, part of the problem is this. The films were largely very good. Some of them, most of them were very good, and at least until maybe some of the more recent films. But the MCU films were largely very good. And because the normal feature process, you can have, you generally have one screenwriter that's working with the producer and the directors, and they get notes. And so you can have someone, you sit in the room with the executive and getting the notes. You're used to that. Television is different. Television is created through a soup of multiple writers in a writer's room that are pitching out not just the episode, they're pitching out the arc of the show and maybe the arc of the next season. And you have to and so you have this inserting notes into the center of that destroys the process. That's why I've never worked on a television show. Even when I worked on Disney, we did not do that. The executives were down the hall from me. But once we as a team created the story idea, we went and pitched it to those executives. They were never sitting in there while we did the work, because that would have disrupted it. So this is wrong, and it doesn't work in television, and it's damaging the MCU television shows.
Yeah, look, I can't argue with any of it, because like you said, the MCU television shows to this point have been, at best, very lackluster, and at worst, terrible. The phase 4 of Marvel so far that I have seen has been lackluster at best. I see this coming through, and again, I think it goes back to, and I'll bring up the story real quick here, because this is what we want to get into. Well, let me fix that. Okay, what in the world?
You're looking good there, the big screen.
I know. I'll cut that part out. Let's do this. Oh, it deleted my screen. That's why, because it went cuckoo earlier.
Take a moment, find it. Yeah,
hang on a second. All right, I shared it, and then that went down. And that goofy, I don't know why the Puck article came up magically earlier.
Yeah, I saw that too. But it's doing something.
That's all right.
It's doing something.
All right, so here we go. Okay, so here's the article that came out recently, and this kind of ties into this. Here we go. Miss Marvel facing, quote, extensive reshoots. And tying into, again, what Bob Chapek is saying, tying into other reshoots we've seen, we get this. Now, just as kind of a catch-up for everybody out there briefly, so this is a show that's tying into the what should have been Captain Marvel 2, which is now The Marvels, because apparently Brie Larson couldn't carry the movie on her own.
Strange for a movie that allegedly made $1 billion. That's quite strange.
Yeah, I really
you must have a large fan base. I'm startled by that. Really
strange to me. But then we have this Miss Marvel, which is a TV show starring, again, this is another one of these Feige projects. That this is one of these Feige projects that started in the comic books after Ike Perlmutter was run off. And, a lot of these characters we see, like Kamala Khan, we have Riri Williams, which is Ironheart, which is supposed to be taking over or taking Robert Downey Jr.'s place. Good luck with that. All these characters kind of came in that post-Ike Perlmutter era, 2016 and beyond. So Kamala Khan is a character that is now, I guess she was in a recent video game that they did with Square Enix. And this is the titular character of the show, to my understanding. So they shot this thing. It's been in the can for quite some time.
At least almost a year. My sources tell me it was essentially in the can, January, February of last year.
That's
2021.
kind of what I had. I thought it's like February, March, something like that. And now all of a sudden, almost 11 months after it's been in the can, now they're going in for extensive reshoots. This seems to suggest to me that there was some kind of audience testing that did not go very well. And they decided, okay, we got to go back and fix a whole lot of stuff. So Cameron, what do you see in all this?
Well, on my Patreon, I've been talking about this particular show for a while. Back in late 2021, I did a sort of special scoop on my Patreon talking about this because I had friends who knew what was happening very deeply on the show. I actually mentored several of the young writers that were on the show. They weren't the ones that leaked this information to me, and I wouldn't have asked them because I would have put them in an awkward position. But others I know who know the show well were telling me that the show was a disaster from the onset, that essentially they had very bad scripts, and then the directors that had been hired, high-profile directors hired for the pilot, Adil and Bilal, who are doing Batgirl for HBO Max and also did Bad Boys for Life, were brought on board to direct the pilot. And my sources tell me they hated the script. They threatened to walk off the project when the executives declined to change the script and implement their notes, and essentially they strong-armed their way to at least get some of their notes addressed before they filmed it. And then they walked away from the show. Apparently they've been offered a chance to do multiple episodes. They said, we're done. So that's already a bad sign. The pilot directors were dissatisfied. They brought on other directors who have, again, this character is a Pakistani Muslim character. I'm Pakistani Muslim, and so I'm intrigued by the concept, but it's breaking my heart to hear the journey that's been on. And they brought on other directors, again, for identity purposes. They brought on other directors who were Muslim or Pakistani origin who didn't have the credits for it. They brought in documentary filmmakers and others that had never made a hour of dramatic television, much less a superhero show, right? So you can imagine when identity politics are guiding all these decision-making processes, that it's a disaster. And so my friends had finished working on the show early last year. All of them went off to other shows and went off to did their thing. And I was like, hey, so when are we going to see the show? And it's like silence, right? And so this show has been in the can, has been essentially edited probably February of last year. And we took one look at it, and they may have done testing. I'm sure they did, but I'm sure on their initial instincts, they're like, "What is this garbage?" Because if they're having documentary filmmakers with no dramatic experience doing a drama of any kind, it's this is not where you learn how to do that, right? On a show with this kind of budget, and so they have a disastrous end product. And so I heard that, I posted that on my Patreon, this kind of inside scoop of the drama there, and then it was revealed that essentially this show was going to be released sometime in 2022. And I said, look, that means a year to 18 months after it was in the can. Said all they're going to do is do massive reshoots of this. I said that in November of last year, and now this is coming out because the only other choice they have is to just throw it in the garbage and never do it. But they're under political pressure to release this thing. They've made such a big deal about it for a few years now for their own identity politics squad, right? And again, I say this as a Pakistani and as a Muslim. I would love for this show to be good. I want the show to be good. Everything suggests to me that the only way it's going to be good is that they got to nail these reshoots and start all over and actually put talented people who are there because they care about this character and want to make it work, and not just because they have XYZ on their resume or their their LinkedIn profile, right? And so it's very troubling to me. But will this show survive? I don't know. This is their last shot at it.
Yeah, and I mean it's like you said, you don't throw $100 million at a learn as you go project, right? I mean, it's because all these things have some pretty significant budgets. These Marvel shows, these Star Wars shows.
You know what they did that? Do you know who did that? Warner Brothers did that with Birds of Prey, where they took a Kathy Yan, who's a director, whose previous film was a small independent feature that, according to IMDb, made $3,000 in the theaters. No, not about $300,000. Talk about $3,000 in the theater. That was a theatrical gross. At least that's what I recall. It was certainly in the few thousands of dollars. This is someone who was then given $100 million movie, and then apparently wasn't up to it. And a large portion of the movie had to be reshot with a stunt coordinator taking over the directing because she couldn't do the fight scenes because she'd done a small indie film. She'd never done a fight scene. And so these can't be learning processes. But again, the people that were doing this were these third generation heirs who are just drunk on the money that they didn't make, throwing that money at stuff and feeling good. Well, I've got this, young Asian director and I'm going to make her huge. You've set Kathy Yann's career back by a decade through that failure. The people associated with Marvel, with Ms. Marvel, they're likely going to have their career sent way back because everyone in town is going to be talking about what happened here.
Yeah. You throw Chloe Zhao in that conversation with what they did to her with the Eternals. I mean, it was, it's not that she's a bad director. It's just that, yeah, exactly. It's just not that she's a bad director. It's that, it's like anything. Some directors going to be better with certain things than others. Like, I don't know if I'd put James Wan in charge of a comedy picture, And
Ang Lee wasn't right for the Hulk. I don't think that's his, I think there's some beautiful moments in it. I don't think his version of the Hulk is right. And I'm a huge Ang Lee fan. I mean, I think The Life of Pi is one of my top 5 films of all time. But, I don't think that was the right filmmaker for that kind of story. So again, this is people experimenting with money that they don't need to be experimenting with.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think that's part of the big problem. And going back to where we started this conversation, I think that has a lot to do what Bob Chapek said. I mean, in his memo to, talking about going back to audience focuses, and what we can see in practice of trying to get things under control. He's having a lot of issues right now with the Galactic Star Cruiser. We can see the cancellations that are happening.
He's getting bad feedback on that from the public. He's getting bad feedback on the Marvel MCU shows. He's getting bad feedback now, unfortunately, on this Boba Fett show. He's hearing it. He's hearing it that people were disappointed. I think the show's getting better. We'll see what happens this week. But he heard it. And imagine being one of the reasons I think that motivated this very, in many ways, stark memo that's actually very harsh and hiding behind just a veil of diplomacy. It's very, we're gonna get to business now. Is imagine being Bob Chapek sitting there, everything's on fire. Now that Iger's officially out, he's sitting there, everything around him is on fire. All the scripts he's getting are garbage. He's like, let's start over here. Everything's on fire. None of this is working. So let's start talking. Let's get serious here, people.
Yeah, and that's why I think, when he talks about, or the Variety article talks about, Kareem Daniel being one of his proteges, uses that language in the article in Variety. He's the one that was the point man for pulling Turning Red from the theaters. We see Chapek's comments. We see these kind of articles. We see all these reshoots going on. Hey, you got to make these things better. You got to give the audiences what they want. Yeah. It's like you have to give them something that they want to go pay for. And I think especially after seeing what we are currently still witnessing with Spider-Man No Way Home, that kind of box office return for Sony, and Chapek's looking back at the past 2 Marvel titles that came before that and thinking, I don't necessarily think we should have made Spider-Man kind of numbers, but we didn't get even, 25% of Spider-Man numbers on these 2 movies. And I mean, none of them have made any money so far. And he's got to be looking at this going, well, we know the audiences are out there. They're going to theaters.
Oh, and they want to.
Why aren't they coming to our stuff?
Yeah. And he knows why. That's why the first pillar is this creativity. That's why they're all going to sit there, and when someone pitches their dumb story arc and sees one of their rival studio heads laugh and go, I'm going to have that guy's job soon, right? When they see that reaction in the room, they're not going to pitch a dumb thing. All this is because all this stuff was being done in bubbles of stupidity. People were just pitching echo chambers at Lucasfilm and Marvel without anyone. Now they're sitting there not only having him, they're sitting there having the other members of the company that want their money and their budgets and their fame with a laser eye sharp on them. This is brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of this is almost comedic to an extent to watch this go down. I mean, like, I'm enjoying the hell out of it. And I know you are too. So Cameron, before we wrap up tonight, any final thoughts that you have about all this stuff that we just talked about?
Well, the final thoughts is I predicted at the end of 2021 on my Patreon that once Susan Arnold, the new chairman, takes over officially on January 1st, and Bob Iger had left, that the gloves would come off. And I'd use the analogy of the moment Palpatine felt he had secured power when he had essentially eliminated the Jedi, and that was his obstacle into absolute rule. He then sends his his protege, his apprentice Darth Vader, to take out the final thing, which was the Separatists. He just, in one quick move. And I'd said, using that analogy, I said the moment that the Emperor is able to unveil themselves, or the Empress in this case, unveils themselves in power, that the Darth Vader of this situation, Bob Chapek, would go nuclear on his enemies. And I didn't know how that was going to play out. And it's been what? It's now less
10
than 2
days.
weeks. 10 days.
Oh, yeah, 10 days since the first of the year. Yeah.
So I mean, and the first week of in Hollywood, as everyone's slowly coming back into the office from being at Cancun for the last month, right? And so,
Right.
so this is really the first week where people are getting to work. And what's released on Monday is this, and that's done on purpose because everyone's awake now. And,
Oh, yeah.
And so this is basically Darth Vader coming in and taking out the Separatists. Here, Chapek has said, you're not going to be an obstacle. We're relentlessly, I'm going to relentlessly cut you down if you're an obstacle. And this is what I predicted. I didn't know how it was going to play out, whether it would be a major firing, but what he's done here is he's now given himself the sword for major firings, because now he's put up a situation where people start coming into these monthly meetings and not taking them seriously. They're going to be out.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to be out, and he's giving them the rope to hang themselves, because there's no way for them to escape the situation if they're not prepared. And if they go against his command, if they're like, look, sir, we really need to have XYZ representation, the audience will catch up to it. I know they're not there yet. He's like, remember my memo? We're going to give the audience what it wants. So
Right.
You're not on board with that. It's time for you to find another job.
And it's not to say that representation can't work,
of course,
but it can't just be about that. I mean, that's been one of the biggest complaints I've had, is that you come out with Shang-Chi and the Eternals, and for a straight month, all they talked about these movies was how diverse and representative, and how the cast was this ethnicity and this skin color and this religion and this,
and not a word about the story or whether it's entertaining or any of that.
I mean, go figure. I mean, that's, and I'm thinking to myself, that's awesome. I got a stack 25, 30 Blu-ray and 4K discs high of Chinese films and Japanese films.
Remember when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was released in the theaters? I had never seen an Asian film in the theater. I went in there because I'd heard it's a good movie, and I was blown away. It was pure magic, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then there were other movies like Hero.
I was just about to say Jet Li and Hero was,
I watched that 3 times.
Cinematography was gorgeous in that film, and the story was amazing. I absolutely, the thing I hate about Hero is that I still don't have a 4K release of it. I've been dying to get my hand. They're still not out there. It's driving me nuts.
And I learned a lot about medieval Japanese and Chinese cultures from these films. Yeah. I learned a great deal, but I wasn't there to learn anything. I was there to be entertained by good movie, and in the process,
the story was beautiful. The acting was beautiful. Everything about it was beautiful. There was a beautiful film, and it's like, why can't they just talk about this? But no, we had to talk about how this was the first Asian this, and the first Asian that, and the first whatever cross-sectional, intersectional, whatever the hell, whatever they talked about with the Eternals for a solid month. I mean, it was like you gave audiences no reason to go out there, so you can have all this representation. That's great. That's dandy. All for it. What's the movie about? And I hope this is something that they're going to learn as they go on, that there has to be some actual substance.
They will learn. They will learn because the boss has established these are the parameters for your employment and under my regime. That has established that in writing. I felt like I was reading Moses coming down the mountain with 2 tablets on his hands. These are the commandments. This is what you're going to do. I mean, it's when I read this memo.
I don't think you're far off at all. I really don't.
Well, what was the last line in my Patreon article after I said, I took my favorite quote from the 10 Commandments, my favorite movie, when Ramsey says, "So let it be written, so let it be done." And that's what
it. It is indeed. It is indeed. Well, Kamran, thank you so much for joining us again. And folks, thanks for sticking around to the end. Make sure you stick around. We try to do these every week, or almost every week as best we can, as scheduling time permits.
People like us.
They do. They love these videos. I mean, some people are like, can we make them shorter? But I'm like, but people keep watching them all the way through. And everybody loves them. Like,
people like them because we don't make them shorter, because, I go on other channels and I say some of these things, but I don't have the time to go beyond a superficial level. Here we go deep.
Yeah, and I think that's what people like. And if people can hang around and watch a 45-minute portion or a 1 hour portion of a live stream, they're watching this. Turn it on in the car, listen. You don't have to watch anything, which is kind of nice because we say it all. But thank you so much for coming. Please make sure you check out Kamran Pasha on his Patreon. Of course, the link will be in the video description below. And Kamran, I know you've been picking up some good support from these, so we're going to keep doing them because it's great.
Yeah,
I want you to keep doing what you're doing.
It's literally like right after one of these videos premieres, I've got all new subscribers coming straight from there, and it's wonderful. And they're very interactive in the community. So you have some really nice people in this community that are coming to mind.
Well, good. I'm glad that's happening because we want to keep doing this because I'm having fun doing it. I hope you're having fun doing it. I hope everybody out there watching is having fun watching this stuff. So thank you once again. If you have not already, please hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Do share the video out on the social medias. You can find me on Twitter as well and on Instagram at Valliant Renegade. And as always, please do leave a comment before you check out. And until next time, take care.